The envelope didn't look like much. Plain white, a hospital logo in one corner, the kind of mail you almost set aside to deal with later. But when Walter opened it at his kitchen table in Greensboro, North Carolina, the number printed on the second page stopped him cold.
$26,000. For a hospital stay, he was certain, completely certain, that Medicare had already covered. 4 nights. He'd had a bed, he'd had a wristband. A doctor came by every single morning. Nurses checked on him through the night. He even ate hospital food off a hospital tray. By every ordinary measure a human being would use, Walter had been admitted to that hospital. But Medicare doesn't use ordinary measures, and on paper, in the literally only place that decides who pays, Walter had never been admitted at all. Listen, if you or someone you love is over 65, I really need you to hear this before the next time any of you walks through a hospital door. Do not sign the first form they hand you without understanding it. Do not assume that lying in a hospital bed for 4 nights means you are actually admitted, and whatever you do, do not throw away a single notice they give you, because one of those notices is the difference between Medicare paying tens of thousands of dollars and you paying it.
What happened to Walter wasn't a billing error. It wasn't some rogue hospital either. It was the system working exactly the way it's built to work. And over this explainer, I'm going to walk you through the 7 traps that quietly drain retirement savings every single day in this country. And here's the crazy part. These traps almost never happen to careless people. They happen to careful people. People who did their homework, trusted the process, and just were never told the one specific question that would have protected them. By the end of this, you're going to have a short list of exact sentences. I'm not talking vague advice here. I mean the precise words to say and the precise notices to demand at the exact moment they matter. So go ahead and write them down as we go. Because the people who walk into a hospital knowing these words, they're the ones who walk out with their recovery and their savings intact. The ones who don't, well, they're the ones opening that plain white envelope a month later. Now, before we dive into the traps, you really have to understand one crucial thing about how a modern American hospital actually runs, because every single trap grows out of it. A hospital isn't just a place of healing. It's also a business operating under enormous financial pressure, from insurers, from Medicare's own payment rules, from administrators literally counting beds and days. Now, none of that makes your doctor a bad person. Honestly, your doctor probably never even sees the billing side. But surrounding that doctor is this giant machine of classification, paperwork, and timing that quietly decides who pays for what. And almost none of it gets explained to the patient lying in the bed. The traps aren't hidden in the medicine, they're hidden in the paperwork. So let's open it up.
Section 1. Consents and network traps. We're going to count down, starting from the trap that cost the least, all the way to the one that cost Walter everything.
So, trap number 7 hides inside a notice most people never even read. And honestly, it's the one I'd correct first if I could only fix one habit. When you're in the hospital and Medicare decides it probably won't cover a particular service, the staff will sometimes hand you a form called an Advanced Beneficiary Notice of Non-Coverage, an ABN. It looks like just another routine consent form, right? Well, it is not. What that form actually says is, hey, Medicare might refuse to pay for this, and if it does, you personally agree to pay the full bill. People sign it the way they sign everything else in a hospital. Quickly, distracted, maybe in pain, just wanting to be a good patient. And in signing it, they literally volunteer to be financially responsible for charges they had every right to question. Here is what almost nobody knows about that form. It actually gives you choices. A properly written ABN offers you options. You can ask the provider to bill Medicare first anyway, so you get an official decision and, more importantly, preserve your right to appeal instead of just agreeing upfront to pay. Think about what happened to Eleanor. She's 73, a retired bookkeeper from outside Sacramento. During a routine stay, she was handed one of these forms for a scan. She signed it without a glance, and 3 weeks later, boom. She owed $800 she absolutely could have contested. The form wasn't the trap. Signing it blind was the trap.
So the exact words you need to keep ready are simple. You say, I'm not signing this until someone explains exactly what Medicare may not cover and why, and I'm choosing the option to bill Medicare first so I keep my right to appeal. And you know what? The moment you start asking that question, you're going to notice something. The whole tone in the room changes because the staff realize you're actually paying attention, which is absolutely crucial because the next trap depends entirely on you not paying attention to who is actually treating you.
That brings us to trap number 6. This is the one people swear can't possibly be legal. And for most seniors, the protection actually is stronger than they think, but only if they understand exactly which kind of insurance they have. Picture this. You do everything right. You confirm your hospital is in your plan's network. You feel completely safe. Then, weeks later, a bill arrives from a doctor you don't even remember meeting. Maybe it's the anesthesiologist or a radiologist who read a scan from a totally different room, or a specialist who popped in for 10 minutes. The hospital was covered, sure, but that particular doctor? Out of network. This is the classic out-of-network surprise, and for years it completely ruined people financially. Now here is the part the internet gets wrong all the time, and I really want to get it right for you. There is a federal law called the No Surprises Act, and it does protect against exactly this. But it protects people with private, commercial insurance. You know, the kind you might still have if you're working past 65 or covering a spouse or on a marketplace plan. If you are on Original Medicare, you're actually already protected by Medicare's own rules, entirely separately from that law. But if you're on a Medicare Advantage plan, your protection depends on that specific plan's network rules, and that is exactly where the surprises sneak back in. So the danger isn't identical for everyone. It's entirely shaped by which card is sitting in your wallet.
That distinction is exactly what makes the protection work. Before any procedure, you need to say, I want every provider who treats me to be in my plan's network. If anyone treated me as out of network, I want to know before they touch me in writing. For commercial plans, that puts the No Surprises Act squarely on your side. For Medicare Advantage, it forces the network question out into the open before the bill, not after. James, a 69-year-old in Tampa, learned this the gentle way. He asked that exact question at intake. The staff flagged that the on-call specialist was actually outside his Advantage plan's network, and the hospital quietly arranged for someone who wasn't. Just one question asked before the procedure, and it stopped a four-figure bill from ever happening.
All right, Section 2, Meds and Early Discharges. Now, even a perfect network and a perfectly handled bill won't save you from the next trap. Because this next one isn't about the doctor you can see, it's about the medication you can't.
Trap number 5 actually begins the exact moment you're admitted, in a part of the building you'll probably never visit. Every hospital runs its own internal pharmacy off a master list called a formulary. It dictates the specific brands and versions of medication it actually keeps in stock. So that blood pressure medication, the heart medication, or the thyroid medication you've been taking for years, the one dialed in milligram by your own personal doctor, it might simply not be on that list. So what does the hospital do? They substitute. They give you a different brand or a different generic or a different release formula. And way too often they do it without clearly telling the patient and sometimes without even flagging it loudly enough to the admitting physician. Look, for an adult over 60, a sudden medication swap is not just a minor inconvenience. The cardiovascular system in particular can react to these changes in very real, measurable ways. We're talking dizziness, major blood pressure swings, even in irregular rhythm. And on top of the health risk, there's a huge financial sting layered right underneath. If you happen to be classified as an outpatient during that stay, and trust me, we are going to talk about exactly how that happens in a minute, the medications you take that you'd normally just take yourself at home, what Medicare officially calls self-administered drugs, well, they might not be covered the way you assume. The hospital can actually bill you directly for them, at hospital rates, which as you can guess are absolutely nothing like the price of your local corner pharmacy. People have ended up paying astonishing sums for pills they literally had a full bottle of sitting on their nightstand at home.
The protection here is something you have to prepare before you ever actually need it. Keep a current, written list of every single medication you take. The exact name, the exact dose, the exact timing. Carry it with you. When you or a family member gets admitted, you physically hand it to the admitting doctor and you say, do not substitute or alter any of my regular medications without a clinical review and my explicit consent. And if any drug here will be billed to me instead of covered, tell me before I take it. That sentence is a game changer. It moves the responsibility right back where it belongs, onto the care team, and forces them to flag a change before it happens, instead of after the bill prints. Okay, we're at the halfway point now. The traps we've talked about so far, they cost people hundreds, maybe a couple $1,000s. They're annoying, sure, but they're survivable. These next three, though, they are different in kind, not just degree, because they don't just nibble at your savings, they can take the whole thing. And honestly, the cruelest part is that the doctors and nurses standing right in front of you aren't even the ones setting the trap, which is exactly why this next one is so incredibly hard to see coming.
Trap number 4 is a phone call. It's a short, rushed conversation that usually happens when you are at your absolute most vulnerable and least able to push back. See, a hospital is always under financial pressure to move patients out of beds. On the ground, what that looks like is a discharge that arrives before the patient is actually ready to go. A doctor steps into the room, says, hey, you're doing well enough to go home. And because a doctor said it, most people just nod, get dressed, and leave. But then 3 days later, they fall while stepping out of the shower, or maybe their surgical wound doesn't hold, or they end up right back in the emergency room, which, by the way, costs about 5 times what those extra days in the hospital would have cost in the first place. But here is the secret Medicare definitely does not advertise. You have the legal right to fight a discharge if you believe it's too early, and the clock to use that right is very short. When you're admitted as an inpatient, within 2 days, the hospital is legally required to hand you a notice called an important message from Medicare. You sign it, and like most people, you probably glance at it and forget it. But that notice contains a goldmine. It has the phone number for your Quality Improvement Organization, or QIO. This is an independent body, totally separate from the hospital, paid by Medicare to review exactly these kinds of early discharge decisions. If you're told to go home and you really don't feel ready, you call that number. You request an expedited appeal. You just have to do it by midnight on the day of your planned discharge while you are still physically inside the building. The moment you file that appeal, the hospital legally cannot make you leave while they review it. And here's the part that completely changes the math. Even if you ultimately lose the appeal, you are not charged for the extra day you spent waiting for the decision. It's basically a free look. The downside is almost nothing, and the upside? It can be days of covered recovery that you would have otherwise completely lost. So the magic words are, I don't feel medically ready for discharge, and I am requesting an expedited appeal to the QIO. Please give me the phone number from my important message notice. Stories like Margaret's play out across this country every single day. Her daughter, who had actually seen an explainer just like this one, asked that single question about a QIO appeal. As a result, the discharge was delayed for 2 days. They finished her physical therapy, and a fall that absolutely would have happened on her first night home, it simply never happened.
Moving on to Section 3, Rehab and the Fine Print. So, you've successfully protected the discharge. You've held your ground. But listen, holding your ground only matters if Medicare actually considered you a real patient in the first place. And that is exactly where the floor starts to give way.
Trap number 3 is the staggering cost of waiting for the rehab you've already been promised. Let's say you've survived the hospital stay, you've fought off an early discharge, and now the hospital is sending you onward to a skilled nursing facility for rehabilitation. We're talking physical therapy, supervised recovery, basically the bridge between the hospital and going home. Under original Medicare, that rehab is only covered if you first had a qualifying inpatient hospital stay of at least 3 consecutive days. Note what I said there, not just 3 days sleeping in a bed, 3 days formally admitted as an inpatient. Oh, and the day you leave? Yeah, that doesn't count toward the total. For decades, that 3-day rule was a brick wall, and patients slammed into it constantly. But here is something genuinely new for 2026 that almost no senior has been told about yet. Medicare is currently running a limited program that actually waives the 3-day requirement for certain planned surgical procedures, and this waiver runs through 2030. On top of that, a huge and growing number of people, specifically those in many Medicare Advantage plans and certain accountable care arrangements, already have that rule waived or softened. So that solid wall, it's got some gaps in it now. The real trouble is that these gaps are super inconsistent, and almost nobody at the hospital can tell you right on the spot whether their specific gap applies to you, which is exactly why you can never, ever assume you're covered.
Before you accept any transfer to rehab, you look the case manager directly in the eye and you ask, will my skilled nursing rehabilitation be covered by Medicare, yes or no? And does the 3-day inpatient rule apply to my situation, or has it been waived? Make them put the answer somewhere in writing where you can actually find it. Remember Walter, the guy with the plain white envelope from the beginning? He was sent to rehab fully believing he was covered. Nobody bothered to tell him the 3-day rule was about to detonate his savings, because nobody had told him the one single thing that actually caused it to detonate. And that one thing is trap number 2.
Trap number 2 is a simple form you sign in the first 10 minutes of arriving. You're scared, you're in pain, and this form quietly hands the hospital a massive financial advantage over you. You walk into any hospital for an admission, and within minutes, someone slides a big stack of papers across the counter. Consent forms, privacy forms, insurance authorization, and folded somewhere deep in that stack is legal language saying you personally accept financial responsibility for any services your insurance doesn't fully cover. Most people sign it exactly the way they sign for a delivery package, without reading a word. Because someone is standing there waiting, they're frightened, and honestly, it just feels rude to slow the process down. But for seniors on commercial coverage, signing that blindly can throw the door wide open to inflated full-rate billing that your insurer would have otherwise negotiated down to a fraction. Now, the protection here costs you absolutely nothing and takes maybe 10 seconds. Before you sign any financial agreement, you slow down, take a breath, and you say, I'm signing only to authorize my insurance benefits. I'm not personally accepting liability for uncovered balance billing. If it makes sense for your particular situation, you can even write that exact intent directly on the form, in pen, right in front of the intake clerk, right beside your signature. It perfectly documents what you agreed to, and more importantly, what you didn't. If anyone in your life, a spouse, a sibling, maybe an adult child who helps manage a parent's care, has a hospital procedure coming up, this is the exact sentence you need to send them today.
Section 4, the observation trap. I've deliberately saved the worst for last, because trap number 1 is the exact one that took Walter's $26,000. And it's the one that once you fully understand it, you will never, ever let happen to anyone you love.
Trap number 1 comes down to a single word, usually written on a chart you will probably never even see. That word is
observation. Get this, roughly 3 out of every 10 Medicare patients admitted to a hospital each year are placed under what's called observation status. Under that specific status, you are technically classified as an outpatient. Yes, even while you are lying in a hospital bed, being seen by specialists, eating hospital meals, and being monitored around the clock for days. You look admitted, you feel admitted, but on paper, you are not admitted. And remember that 3-day rule we just talked about for rehab? Observation days do absolutely not count toward it, not a single hour of them. So a senior can spend 4 nights in a hospital, leave, desperately need rehabilitation, and suddenly discover that because they were never formally admitted, that entire rehab stay is theirs to pay for, completely out of pocket. Tens of thousands of dollars. That is precisely what happened to Walter. He came in with severe chest pain and fluid on his lungs. He had a bed, a whole team of nurses, a specialist, and 4 full nights of care. But when his wife called to check on his rehab coverage after he was discharged, they were told he had been under observation the entire time. The resulting rehab bill came to a staggering $26,000. Nobody said that word to me, he told me later. Not once. If someone had just told me, I would have asked them to change it.
So here's exactly what he should have been told and what you now know to do. The very first thing, literally the moment you or a family member is settled in a hospital bed, you ask the attending physician or the case manager directly using these exact words. Am I admitted as an inpatient or am I under observation status? If they look at you and the answer is observation, you immediately say, I'm requesting that my status be reviewed for inpatient admission based on medical necessity. That verbal request gets documented and the care team legally has to respond to it. In a whole lot of cases, just because a patient or family member explicitly asks, the status is reviewed and it gets changed.
But wait, there's a second layer of protection here, and you have to demand it by name. The law actually requires hospitals to tell Medicare patients in writing when they're placed under observation. That required document is called the Medicare Outpatient Observation Notice. Most people just call it the MOON. And legally, it must reach you within 36 hours, whether you're on original Medicare or a Medicare Advantage plan. If you've been in a hospital bed for more than a day and a half and no one has physically handed you that form, you speak up and ask, where is my MOON notice? Just saying those words tells the hospital staff instantly that you know your rights. And now for the part that almost no senior in America has even heard about yet, a change that basically reframes this entire explainer. For decades, observation status was an absolute brick wall. You could not appeal it. You could ask, you could plead, but the classification itself was totally beyond challenge. Well, as of early 2025, that finally changed. After years of grueling litigation, Medicare put a brand new rule in place. Eligible patients on original Medicare who get switched from inpatient to observation now have the right to formally appeal that reclassification. When that switch happens, the hospital is supposed to give you a notice about it, a Medicare change of status notice, and that piece of paper opens a door that was bolted shut your entire life. So the word observation on your chart is no longer an absolute verdict. It is now, finally, a decision you are legally allowed to contest. Walter didn't have that door. But you do. And it's wild because almost nobody is being told it even exists.
Section 5, Hospital Protection Plan. Let's step back for a second and look at all 7 of these traps together, because there's a deeper truth underneath all of them. Listen, not one of these traps requires a villain. There's no evil doctor twirling a mustache, no scheming nurse out to get you. Every single one of these is simply what happens when an enormous, complex system optimized for beds, days, and billing codes meets a frightened human being who was never handed the instruction manual. The system isn't sitting there waiting to be defeated by some clever trick. It's just waiting to be questioned by an informed patient. That is literally the whole game. The people who keep their savings aren't smarter or richer or luckier than you. They're just the ones who knew to ask the right questions, out loud, early, and in writing. So, sometime in the next hour, before all this fades from your memory the way information does when you don't write it down, take out a physical piece of paper or just open the Notes app on your phone. Write these down. 5 questions and 1 habit.
Number 1, am I admitted as an inpatient or under observation status? Number 2, I'm requesting my status be reviewed for inpatient admission based on medical necessity, and where is my MOON notice? Number 3, I want every provider who treats me to be in my plan's network in writing before they treat me. Number 4, do not substitute my regular medications without clinical review and my consent, and tell me before I take anything I'll be billed for. And number 5, I'm signing only to authorize my insurance benefits, and if I'm told to leave before I'm ready, I'm requesting an expedited QIO appeal. That right there, that's your hospital protection plan. Keep it somewhere you can find it in 5 seconds flat. And I want you to commit to it for the next 30 days. Every appointment, every specialist visit, every single time you or someone you love walks into any medical facility, that list goes with you.
You read it before you walk through the sliding doors. Do that, and in 30 days it completely stops being a list, it becomes a reflex, it becomes a habit. And the people who build that habit are the exact ones who leave hospitals with their recovery fully protected and their retirement savings still firmly theirs.
Now, there's one more crucial piece to all this, and it follows directly from everything we just covered today, because the danger absolutely does not end at the hospital doors. It follows you right to the rehabilitation facility, to the skilled nursing center, straight into the next set of forms and the next stack of bills waiting on the other side. And the protections over there, they work completely differently than the ones we just learned. Think about it. If you only know how to protect the hospital stay, you've really only protected half the journey. So the next explainer covers the other half. Make sure you hit subscribe so it finds you the very day it goes up, because the people who watch both are the ones who never have to open that plain white envelope at all.